Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Gettin Sketchy Live, the greatest live broadcast in all of YouTube. I'm glad that you're along with us for the next 45 minutes plus. It's going to be a plus one tonight, I think. We'll see. I'm doing something absolutely crazy, but like always, I'm joined by Ashley, sitting right over there. How you doing tonight, Ashley?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking, and I hope you folks are too. I would welcome you also to the penultimate episode of this season. This is our 10th episode of the season. The last drawing, but not the last episode. You make sure that you tune in next week while we go over our artwork and critique it and tell you what we liked about it, maybe what we would have done different.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are new to Gettin Sketchy, what we do here is we try to create a drawing within 45 minutes for you live on YouTube, which, you know, that in itself is kind of crazy. And then on top of that, tonight, we're going to be using watercolor for the first time as part of Getting Sketchy, which is absolutely...
Is this the very first time we've never broken out watercolor before?
Yes, this is the very first time. And the reason we haven't used watercolor before is because watercolor requires some drying time. But we're going to try to work through that tonight.
With commercial breaks. Matt's got 2 commercial breaks built into this tonight's episode. So, no, I'm just kidding. No commercial breaks.
Yeah, don't tell him that because YouTube does put in commercial
breaks.
That's
right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So,
no planned commercial breaks.
Right. I'm not doing that. YouTube does that. But we're not going to have commercial breaks. Well, there might be some commercial breaks that pop up for you, but it's not us. But we are going to be using a hairdryer tonight, and I'm going to try to make it as pleasant as possible for you while the hairdryer is in use. Okay, so there's the disclaimer. But I am working from a photo reference. To find that photo reference, you can head over to the community tab on the YouTube channel to get to the YouTube channel. Click on the little icon of my face. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while you're there. And then click on the community tab, and there at the top post, if you are watching this live, is going to be the photo reference that I'm going to be working from, and you can work alongside me as well. The goal tonight is to loosen up, which is incredibly hard for me. So we're gonna do something that might seem a little crazy on the surface. I'm not entirely convinced it's gonna work, but I did a thumbnail sketch beforehand, so hopefully it will. I didn't time myself, but it felt like it was really long. So we'll see what happens. We'll go until we get moderately finished, and hopefully I'll be able to finish inside of 45 minutes. Let's see, what else do I normally say? Oh, if you're new to the channel and you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you like this kind of stuff, make sure you give it a like. And like Ashley mentioned, next week is going to be our last episode of the season. That is the episode where we go through and critique all the artworks that we made during the season. And that might sound like it's boring, but it's not. It's very valuable because we're going to go through and talk about the things that we've done well with each piece and the things that we wish we would have done differently. And you might be thinking, well, that's not my artwork, so it doesn't apply to me. Well, yes, it does. You can learn from those comments and observations that we make and apply those things to your own artwork. That's why in art colleges and college programs, they critique the artworks at the end of the project, and that is not just for the benefit of the artist. Of course, it is beneficial to the artist, but it's also beneficial to all of the other students in the class. So I would encourage you to make sure that you watch Getting Sketchy next week. It will be live, and we'll be looking at all the artworks. And if you want to take your drawing and painting skills to another level, then check out the membership program at thevirtualinstructor.com. There is a ton of content there on a variety of subject matter and media. We have courses. We do weekly live lessons. We are in a live lesson series right now on Line and Wash. So if you like this kind of stuff, then you can join us for the live lesson series that we're currently doing. We also do weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and there's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. The program is dirt cheap, and we also offer a week-long trial for free. And it's not cheap because the value's not there. The value is absolutely there. The price is actually shockingly low for how much content you get and the quality of the content as well. If you want to learn more about the membership program, there's a link in the description below this video. You can go check it out. Also, if you want to just check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free and get on our mailing list, There's a link for that in the description below. I'll send you a bunch of free art lessons too if you sign up for that. All right, I think that is it. Hello to everyone in the critique. Glad to see all you guys there. You guys are still in the habit of telling us where you are from. I love that. France, Ontario, Canada, all over the world, Texas. Thank you guys for making the time out of your day or night or early morning to join us here live on YouTube. That really means a lot to us. Oh, and there is a chat box, obviously. If you have a comment or question that's directed at Ashley or I, we encourage you to use the super chat function. That helps out the channel, of course. You can also put your comment or question in capital letters. But if you use the super chat function, that will prominently display your comment or question and let us know that we need to address it immediately or almost immediately. So anyway, I think we're ready.
Yeah, I think everything has been said that should be said. So
yep.
Go ahead and take a look at your reference and materials, and I can't wait to see you get started. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm nervous. Let's switch over. All right, so here's the photo reference over here on the left, and we're not going to be including everything in the photo reference. So we're going to be selective about what we include, and that will make more sense in just a minute. I'll bring up the timer in just a minute, but I want to talk about the paper here. This is Stonehenge cold press watercolor paper. It is in a watercolor block, meaning each of the sheets of paper are connected to one another.
All the way around.
With adhesive all the way around. It keeps the paper nice and taut during the painting process. So if you have problems with paper buckling or wrinkling, this will help with that. And I am going to not be using a graphite pencil tonight. I know. Let that sink in for a minute. Yep. Yeah, just let it sink in. Let it simmer. No graphite pencil tonight. I'm going to be doing all of this purely with watercolor and pen and ink. And here's another shocker.
A purist.
I'm going to start with watercolor.
What?
Yeah, no. It is absolutely shocking. I don't know what's happening here, but I am going to start with watercolor and then follow up with pen and ink washes and then probably go back to watercolor in the end.
All right.
My goal here is to be loose, remember? So if I start with watercolor, hopefully it will keep me from being too tight with my image. Now, the reason why I'm doing this in contrast to how I usually do a line and wash image is because for the live lesson series, we are doing a very tight, very controlled line and wash image where I'm going to be drawing with pen and ink for a very long time before making the watercolor applications. And I'm going to keep those watercolor applications pretty tight. This, however, I want to go the completely different direction. It's still the same combination of media, but hopefully the result will be quite different, pretty loose.
It may have that sort of that architectural rendering feel to it, you know, with the blotches of ink or of a paint kind of spilling outside of the lines. It's nice.
Yeah. And you know, this hopefully is going to have the flavor of urban sketching. Now, the phrase urban sketching is kind of relatively new. It's quite a phenomenon, actually. And true urban sketching is really just plein air painting.
Right, plein air painting with in a city.
What? Yeah, I see that comment, Jan. But who are you, and what have you done to Matt? I know it's completely backwards. That's why I'm so nervous. About this approach, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, back to urban sketching. It's really just plein air painting, and that's not what we're doing here. I want to just be real clear. The style of the art that we're creating could fall under the category of what is now called urban sketching, because now you see urban sketching out there on the internet, and everything is a line and wash image. Everything is a line and wash image. But if you sat down with a graphite pencil and drew a cityscape, that would be urban sketching in my book. But, you know...
But we know what you mean.
Everybody knows what...
It's sort of almost taken on a look to an art. Not really...
Right.
It's not really about the process, but it's about the look of the finished piece.
Right. And I also want to be transparent that urban sketching really refers to plein air painting.
Which we don't do here. We work from references.
Right. We're in a studio.
So it's going to be urban-like sketching. Like urban sketching.
Urban-like sketching. I like
Pseudo-urban sketching.
Urban-like sketching. All right, so I'll go through the materials real quick. I'm going to be using a sumi brush for this. It's a smaller sumi brush. These brushes are made by a company called Uku.
Those look nice.
Uku. I've got a whole set of them here. I am using, this is actually the smallest of the set. My picture plane here is fairly small, 5 inches wide by 7.3 inches tall.
All right.
And before someone says, well, why did you do 7.3? That's weird. I can't figure that out. You can figure it out. Those marks are marked out on a ruler. But the reason is because the composition dictates that. You know, somebody brought it up in one of the comment sections in the membership program that, you know, some people, I think, feel like you've got to work to the size of the paper. So if you have an 8x10 sketchbook, for example, all of your artworks need to be 8x10. No, you dictate the composition and therefore dictate the size that you work in. I've got this little picture plane planned out, but the paper that I'm working on is actually 9 inches by 12 inches. So again, 5 inches, 7.3 inches tall. I will be using, my hair dryer is trying to get away. I told Ashley I needed one of those hair dryer holsters.
Yeah, like that dangles above you or something.
Yeah, well, it dangles on the side, or maybe I just, you know, wear it like a holster.
Wear it around your neck, like Flava Flav.
That might be a little cumbersome. This is my Winsor & Newton field watercolor set that I have had for many years, and I absolutely love it. You know, you're limited in colors here, but we're going to be limiting our color palette anyway tonight. But this is just a wonderful little thing. You got a few little palettes. One of mine is already broken off here. I don't care. And all these little cakes of professional Winsor & Newton colors. The colors that we're going to be using tonight, we're going to be using ultramarine, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and just a touch of cadmium yellow, and maybe a touch of sap green. But we're going to start by only using the ultramarine and the burnt umber with just a touch of burnt sienna. And then we're going to kind of create a duotone painting with just those two colors. And then we're going to go back and kind of just enhance some of the colors and bring out a little bit of color. So we're dealing somewhat with local color, but not entirely. Okay, so we want to harmonize this painting, and we want to simplify it too so we can get finished in time. I am also going to be using Staedtler pigment liners for the pen and ink portion, and I have pulled 2 pens out of the set that I will be using. I'm using a 0.1 and a 0.3. So the 0.3 is larger, going to make a wider line. 0.1 is going to make a smaller line. This will give us a little bit of variety in the line quality, so the image is a little bit more interesting. I also have a paper towel, which is important because I will be using this paper towel to lift up color in areas to create some highlights. All right, I think that's it.
It feels like you're missing something,
here.
but it's the pencil. You've really gone
no graphite.
Gone through all of your materials.
No graphite here. Oh, by the way, this paper is cold pressed. I don't know if I mentioned that before.
I think so.
It has a texture associated with it. All right, gotta get the nerves out here. Get ready to go. All right, I'm going to start with a little bit of the burnt umber and go ahead and start painting out the shape of the building. No graphite here at all. I am going to turn on the timer, however.
Oh, yeah.
So I am fair. And 45 minutes. Let's go ahead and get started.
And we're off.
So I don't have a camera for my palette tonight. Just letting you guys know. I'm taking a little bit of burnt sienna and a little bit of the burnt umber. And I'm going to thin this a little bit. And then I'm just going to kind of figure out where I want my building to start. And let's move it. Let's move it right here. And again, I'm going to be very loose with this.
Yeah, and then the contour lines that you put in with the pen will kind of sharpen things up a little bit.
Well, I want the pen lines to be kind of loose as well.
Okay.
So we'll see how this goes here. But I'm going to start pretty loose, just planning out the shapes of the main building here.
Guess that's a bell tower of some sort.
It's definitely a bell tower.
Mhm.
There are bells, and it is a tower. So,
It's Belltown.
bell tower. And there's some perspective going on in here. So that's going to make things a little bit trickier with the watercolor wash, but that's what I want. What I'm asking for is to be loose, and I have to let that happen instead of trying to control it too much. But in my practice sketch, I told Ashley, I was like, this feels too tight and too controlled, even though I didn't use graphite at all. I didn't draw things out like I normally would.
I suggested if he wants to really loosen up, he could use his left hand.
That's just disaster.
And watercolor, there's always a chance for the unexpected anyway. So we'll just see what happens over the next 43 minutes.
All right.
It's a partnership between Matt and the water tonight. Hopefully the watercolor will show up and do its part, and I'm sure Matt will do his.
Well, we shall see. All right, so it gets a little wider here at the bottom. There's a piece that comes out here.
Lord Engine mentioned you're
comes up
sort of
here.
using something that's similar to the Zorn palette tonight, with all those earthy colors. A little bit.
Somewhat, yeah.
Mhm.
And we have kind of a rooftop right here. And then another rooftop right here.
There we go.
Okay, and while this is still a little bit wet, I'm going to put down a little bit of water and then just pull out a little bit of a lighter edge here. Put a little texture in there too.
Susan asks, Ashley, have you done watercolor? I guess I haven't for a Gettin Sketchy episode. I didn't remember that we hadn't used watercolor at all on Gettin Sketchy. So,
Well, again, there's a reason why we haven't.
yeah, I mean, I think didn't you use like those watercolor
I use watercolor
pens
markers.
or
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. You used watercolor markers. That's as close as we've gotten. So no, I haven't used. Well, I love watercolor. I like to paint in watercolor. But never have for. Actually, I haven't done a watercolor on Gettin Sketchy or a live lesson. So I won't be doing that next either, since Matt is working with watercolor and ink now in the live lesson. So if you really love this combination, you should definitely join us after this broadcast at the live lesson, because Matt will only start painting tonight. It's a brand new series. Practically.
I will
brand
not
new.
start painting today.
Oh, okay.
No, I will be drawing with ink for a while.
Oh,
Remember,
yeah,
that's
okay,
going to be
right. I'm sorry.
more
You're starting
control.
you're starting with ink on that one. So the reverse of this process. Very good.
All right, now I'm going to take a little bit of ultramarine and let it mix a little bit with the burnt umber and start to create a little bit of shadow. And I'm going to try to bump up the light in this scene. So I'm going to try to make the contrast between the light side and the dark side of the building a little bit stronger.
Lord Engine says the best watercolor starts out looking like a regrettable decision. It's probably true. It's a very unique medium. Takes the right temperament. I think it just takes the right temperament, and we don't all have it all of the time. I've had great watercolor days, and then other days when I should have probably been drawing with a mechanical pencil, and I just wasn't really. I didn't have the right heartbeat for watercolor on a given day. It looks like Matt's got the right heartbeat tonight.
I don't know if I do or not. I'm pretty sure I have a heartbeat right now.
Probably got a lot of heartbeats right now.
I'm going to try to pull out just a few faint indications of some of the lines that happen here. So
Yeah, you got to be really sensitive to your level of saturation working with watercolor, because sometimes you want to put a wet color on wet paper, like Matt did in the shadow with the ultramarine that mix nicely into a neutral. But then sometimes you want it just mostly dry, so you get softer edges, and there's some variability between that. So I spend a lot of time touching my paper with the back of my index finger when I'm working with watercolor and trying to gauge how saturated it is. Is it ready for the next stroke, or do I need to give it another minute or two to dry a bit more? So it's one of the decisions I make. But that's a decision that I can make when I'm not doing Getting Sketchy, because there's not a time limit. If I need to give it more time to dry, I give more time to dry. So Matt's got a little bit more of a challenge tonight, and it's a great start.
All right, so I'm going down into some of the trees down here with a little bit more of a heavier ultramarine application. Still staying pretty light with this. You can see that the front, the front-facing parts of these buildings are pretty light, so we'll need to get some contrast there around it. And then I'm going back up in some of these areas in the palm trees and just putting some dabs of that ultramarine there, letting it bleed a little bit. I'll let things bleed, let things move around. These trees get a little smaller as they work their way out.
The trees are nice in this image because of their changing scale relationship leads back in space.
Yeah, and there's that little sidewalk too.
Mm-hmm.
That will add some grounding for the trees.
Now, will these trees be the most forward element in your composition? You're going to leave those buildings out?
I'm going to have a little bit of the road coming around.
Okay.
I think that's the plan there. And behind these little trees here, there are some darker bushes. So you again let the ultramarine and the burnt umber mix a little bit, create kind of a grayish color. It's pretty shadowy down there.
And are you working on a tilt? You're on the tilted surface.
I am on a tilted surface, so you can see some bleeding working its way down. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Watercolor's trying to run away from me. Again, going back up into that building, bringing a little bit more of that into the bell tower. Bringing a little bit more of that ultramarine in.
You've used that set of watercolors for a really long time, and it's the paint wells are pretty small. It's worth pointing out that the higher quality watercolor, it goes further. So even though it costs more, you'll be able to use what you get for a longer period of time. You won't have to keep going back and picking up more watercolor to reach a saturation level that you want in your puddles.
Right, a little bit more of the ultramarine, very thinned out here. I'm going to create a little bit of shadow side of this building here. Shadow right there. Edge. Then I'm going to dig out a little bit of a lighter value right in here.
Susan asks,
edge of the building.
What is the brush again? Matt is using a Sumi brush, S-U-M-I, and it's like a calligraphy brush, sort of, for Sumi painting is Japanese painting with black ink typically, and I've been told that the bristles in Sumi brushes are made of wolf hair, but I don't know. And I've got a set too, but they go to a really nice, long, sharp point. So Matt mentioned that this is his smallest brush in his set. And we looked at one of his larger brushes before going on air, and it was not wet. But he assured me that even that really large brush will flick out to a nice, sharp point. So, theoretically, you can use one of the bigger brushes all the way through your artwork because they do go to a small point. If they stop pointing, it's a bad brush. You got to get rid of it.
Okay, while we're still a little wet, a little damp in areas, start adding a little bit more of a pop of color in some areas with a little bit of burnt sienna here. right up here at the top of the building. I'm just going to add a little bit of that. Maybe this area too. And
Susan, oh, go ahead, Matt.
let's go ahead and add a little bit here to the roof.
Susan had asked, would these types of brushes work just as well with acrylic ink? And viscosity is the same, pretty much the same as water, so I would say so. Matt, you use acrylic ink.
No, not really.
No?
No.
You don't use acrylic ink?
I use acrylic ink for pen and ink drawing,
Would
but
you,
not for.
Would you use a sumi brush with that ink?
You could, yeah, for
Okay.
ink wash, for sure, yeah.
Okay.
Right. So again, just working with basically 3 colors here so far. Again, that's ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and burnt umber.
Marina
All right.
Free tells us that she believes there are squirrel hair brushes, squirrel hair in the sumi bristles. So very good.
I thought this smelled like a little bit like squirrel.
Mm-hmm. Smells like a squirrel.
Just glad it doesn't smell like a skunk. All right. A little bit more of an intense application of the ultramarine down here where we have shadows and the trees. And keeping things really loose.
Lord Inch's got a good point. You know, if you're about acrylic, if you use these brushes with acrylic ink, it'd be a great idea to wash them out super well, because acrylic is strong business. And when you're working with watercolor, you don't have to worry so much about leaving a little bit of color in your brush. It's not going to ruin it. It's going to come out the next time you use it, probably. Might affect your mixtures, but it's not going to ruin it. Ike, I see your message. I'm doing well. I hope you are.
We're going to bring a little bit of that mixture of brown, burnt umber, and burnt sienna down here in the trees as well. Add a little bit of warmth. And we'll make more sense of all this stuff in just a minute.
Well, I love the warm-cool combinations that you're developing in there. It's kind of complementary, you know.
Yeah, that's why I chose these colors. You know, and also I just wanted to, you know, people to see that you don't have to use the actual colors that you see, and you don't even have to use many colors.
Yeah. If you're focused on the values, you got a lot of flexibility with hue. So anti-champion says, does Matt have the reference on a stand or flat on the table? It's on a stand. It's actually on an iPad that is tilted up to be pretty parallel to his face. When it's tilted up like that, and I use it too, you don't really have any distortions like you might if the reference were laying flat on a table and part of it was further away from you. So he and I both like to have our references tilted pretty much vertical.
And I'll be honest with you guys, I am not looking at the time at all.
Well, I think you're doing great on time.
Just going as fast as I can here. All right, let's add a little bit more color. We're going to do a quick dry in just a minute. This is a little bit more of the burnt sienna.
While you're working, are you already thinking about like your ink application? Are you looking at marks around the edge and kind of planning out?
I am not thinking about the ink application at all.
Just staying with the water.
Yeah, I'm treating this right now as purely a watercolor painting.
Okay. It's good to know.
I'm trying to let things kind of merge out.
I remember when I was in college many years ago, we were working with a watercolor artist who was an artist in residence at my university for a semester, and she had us do a lot of watercolor painting with no drawings. She was kind of against starting with pencils, so I spent most of a semester working with watercolor in this way without the application of ink afterward. And we got quite a few. I'm talking about my classmates and myself. We got quite a few failures, but the watercolors that came out well were fantastic, and they all did have a looser, sort of a freer feel to it than our oil paintings typically did. So it was a great experience, and we became, we got over the fear of having a bad watercolor. Sometimes it's just it's not entirely controllable, though we do try to exercise as much control over it as we can. And I think it was a good lesson on learning from our failures that we hear about growing up all the time. But you got to give yourself a chance to fail if you're going to learn from them. And watercolor is a great place to go for that. All right, Ike, I see your message. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great night. And
Ike's had enough. Huh?
He's seen enough. He's probably got homework to do. Let's see. Susan says, question. So doing watercolor first allows for more looseness. It lends itself to that because you don't have lines to fill in. When we start with a contour line drawing, sometimes we can fall into the sort of like coloring mode, where we're really just coloring inside of the line. So if there aren't any lines, then you're bound to end up possibly a little bit outside of the contours that you'll then later discover with the pen. But we'll see. Matt might just sharpen all his edges up anyway, because he can't help himself. But it's looking nice and loose now.
I'm gonna try to keep it loose and free.
Keeping it loose. Right. If you start with your contours, you could, what Jan says, it could be a little paint by number. But I tell you what, painting by number is not a bad way to learn to see the shapes of value that are out there in front of us. If you can do a paint by number exercise, and I know it's not really art, it's just an activity done with paint. But an artist makes those paint by number sets by looking at a subject in the round, subject with gradation, and deciding for themselves, if I had to take that gradation and break it into shapes, where would my shapes start and stop? What would be the border of those shapes, and what would those shapes be? And then that's a great way to paint when you're not using paint by numbers. Paint with flat shapes of value, and then blend those edges together, and you've got a nice and realistic looking painting.
Okay, it is time for me to use the hairdryer here. So I'm going to put on some music for your entertainment, and I'm going to mute the audio so you don't hear this. We'll be right back.
Jan says, talk amongst yourselves.
And we're back.
Matt was verklempt.
We're back. All right, I'm going to start adding a few little details here. Mainly some of the darker areas on the building, some of the areas where we see a little bit of shadow. So again, I'm just using a mixture of the ultramarine and the burnt umber. Try not to get too dark with this.
Most marks are holding in place pretty well.
And see how that burnt umber and blue make such a nice dark value.
Working with such a limited palette has really contributed to the harmony of your piece already. It's a great idea for all you folks out there to limit your colors, and don't. I would recommend, unless it's a very special subject that just has to be a specific color or it's not recognizable as the thing that it is, then limit your color palette. You won't be able to mix all of the colors in the world, but you'll end up with some harmony by default in your artwork because all of the colors that you are using will have to be used a lot, mixed together a lot, and so they'll be represented across your picture plane. That's where the harmony comes from.
Yeah, don't forget that you can make a painting any color that you want. The values are really more important. And of course, we don't have to be perfect with any of this. Obviously. This is pretty darn loose. A few darker details on back here. A few darker bits in the palm tree right here. And over here too, just a couple of touches. And if it seems too strong when I put it down, I can just lift it up real quick. And we're gonna add a little differentiation to some of these roof lines. A little bit of shadow.
Okay, Ike, this is your official shout out. You have been shouted.
Ike wanted a shout out?
Yes.
I thought he had enough.
He couldn't leave until he got a shout out. That was it. That was the official shout out.
Let's bring some of that dark value down here to the window. And then we've got a little door down there, but I want to use a little...
Just peeping behind that tree there.
A little bit of... Yeah, and we've got a little bit of that white building showing through there, which I completely obliterated. Completely covered up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to lift up some of the watercolor right here. So I'm just going to scrub a little bit with the brush. I don't know if it's going to work because I've already dried it with a hairdryer. Just going to lift up a little bit, and it is coming out a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's still lifted. Ultramarine lifts pretty well compared to some of the other pigments. It's going to work.
And while we're at it, let's lift out some of these highlights here for the trees. Just give it a little scrub. Scrub and pull.
And this is pretty high quality paper, so you can really scrub on it without the fibers balling up on you. It may have, depending on what you're working with out there, sometimes the paper doesn't hold up to that scrub and lift as well.
Yeah, you need to be using high quality paper, because the scrubbing will affect the paper. If you have low quality paper, it will not come out. All right, I'm going to put a little bit more shadow here on the trees, and then we're gonna let it dry with a hairdryer again, and then we'll be ready to add the ink applications, and then we'll go back with a little bit more watercolor, adding just a little bit more color, more of the local color that we see. These shadows down here are pretty dark. Bush.
Yeah, they're very strong in the foreground. Of course, these dark marks get a little lighter as they dry, so plan for that.
Got edge of a building right here.
Lord Engine mentions how much paper quality does make a difference. He realized once he spent some real money on paper, and most especially in watercolor. I mean, it's more of a player in watercolor than any other painting medium. It's equipment in watercolor because it's, you know, it doesn't get covered up. It's always there. You can use
There's a little
acrylic
bit of
paint.
shadow coming in
You
here.
can paint on cardboard. It can look great. Might not last more than 10 years, but it'll look great.
All right, let's give this a quick, well, let's see. I feel like I want just a little bit. You know what? I don't. I'm going to go ahead and give this a dry. So I'll turn back on your music entertainment, and then we'll dry this real quick. And what many people don't know, if you shake the hair dryer like that, it makes it work better. That's not true. It's
just how
I just made that up.
It's just how we use hair dryers. Does anybody use a hair dryer by holding it still?
All right, I'm going to start with the .01 pen. There goes my hair dryer.
Ooh.
On the floor. It's okay.
Well, we'll need it again.
I might need it again, but I'm going to start with the .1 pen, not the .01 pen, and I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to try to allow my lines to be just as loose as the watercolor. So basically what I'm doing is finding the building from the color that I've already got down. So I'm concentrating on contour lines, but I'm also trying to be a little loose and suggestive with my marks. So we're definitely going to have to come back up here and add a little pop more of the burnt sienna for sure. Let that orange to pop and stand out. And I'm not going to use a line everywhere. If I don't need to use a line, I'm not going to include it. There's a lot of information in the watercolor alone.
That's true.
So I'm just going to kind of use the line to enhance what I've already got on the surface. I don't want the line to just take over.
Do you feel like the paper the area you're drawing in now is completely dry, or is it still just barely moist?
Oh, it's completely dry.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's just probably very, very slightly moist.
You're
but
not having a problem making marks on it.
Not enough. Yeah, not enough to
Okay.
to matter. Yeah. I could still lift watercolor in this area, but it's not super wet that if I made marks here, it would, you know, be wet into wet.
Yeah.
So as you're doing this, you might find that some of the things that you thought were in a certain position are actually not in that position. And that's okay. That's part of this look here to this image.
I want to give a shout out to Ike not leaving the chat. Ike, just stay for the whole show. Stay for the whole show. We've only got 14 minutes left. You can make it. I hope you're drawing along. In fact, I hope you're all drawing along. Even if you're not working with watercolor, you can always make a drawing at the same time. It's fun to draw with friends. The only thing that separates us is distance. That's nothing. Do you remember when you were younger, getting together with friends of yours, and y'all would sit and draw, and look at each other's drawings?
The only friends I remember doing that with are you guys. You know?
Yeah.
It's probably true for you too, right?
Yeah, it probably is. I think so. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And they were all funny pictures, humorous. I mean, I would laugh so hard at my own drawings and drawings my friends made.
I remember laughing really hard at some of the drawings.
I remember people over time, I would be with other friend groups sometimes where I was the only person that would draw regularly. And so I would sit around and draw characters of everybody. And it was not always appreciated in the same way. Some people don't want to be caricatured if they didn't volunteer for it, as it turns out. So
imagine that. Okay, so you can see I'm still staying pretty loose with my lines. Now let's draw a few lines to indicate a palm tree here. Let these lines be loose. Right. Maybe a little bit of just some lines spraying out there. As we work down, we can kind of define this rooftop right here. And this is this is not a super easy image to draw. Just
all those buildings are turned at their, at unusual angles to one another.
Right.
There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah, there is a lot. So this is a challenging image for sure. But, images like this sometimes are great for loosening it up. Because there's so many details, you can just kind of say, oh, whatever, I'm just going to.
Yeah, and I like what you said at the top of the show about not necessarily including everything. You don't feel like you're under pressure to include all the information in a drawing. Just what feels like is the most important. Main character marks.
And that's especially true with line and wash.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to be selective on what you're going to include and what you're going to exclude.
We've used watercolor pencils on here before too, right? Watercolor pencils and watercolor marker.
I don't know if we've actually used watercolor pencils.
I remember.
We used them for live lessons, but not for, I don't think for Gettin Sketchy.
All right, well, this is a special show then.
Yeah, it is because it's watercolor.
Yeah, after all these seasons.
Well, it's always been a difficult thing to do with the drying time, and watercolor really needs to be layered. But if you do something loose like this, it looks like we're going to have time. There's 10 minutes left. There's still a lot more that I'd like to do, but it does feel like we're going to be able to complete this one in a reasonable amount of time. Next rooftop here. And then we've got the corner of the building right here.
And this is still
another corner.
Did you switch to the 01 pen?
This is still the 01 pen. I have not. That's the only pen I've used.
Okay.
Might be the only pen that I do use.
Yeah, these are very delicate marks. I like that.
Not too dominating.
Mike C. asks, are there multiple vanishing points in this building? And there are, just because the buildings are not perfectly parallel and perpendicular to one another. In fact, the building that's like directly in front of us, right behind those trees, it looks like it bends at a really obtuse angle on its facade. And so the portion that's right in the center, like bottom half center, that's facing directly at us. So that would be more like what you would see in a one-point perspective drawing. Same with the buildings that are on either side of the composition that are not part of Matt's artwork. And then, of course, the bell tower itself is turned at an angle to us so that a corner is a little bit closer to us than any one whole plane. And so it is in 2-point perspective, and arguably it's probably subtly 3-point perspective with a vanishing point way, way, way up in the sky.
Yeah, pretty much everything in reality is in 3-point perspective.
Yeah, that's true. We're working with perspective right now in my Art 1 class, and we're drawing letters in perspective. And one thing I was explaining to my kids today, and boy, did they take it to heart. We're going to end up with some crazy complicated drawings, more so than my intention for the project. But I was explaining to them that as long as you know where your eye level is and your vanishing point goes on your eye level, there's an infinite number of vanishing points you could use as long as they remain on that same eye level. As long as that doesn't change, and then every portion of your drawing can be turned at its own angle that doesn't really have to necessarily match the other elements in a drawing. And this is with letters, so they can be feel like they're really jumbled up. And it's going to make for some really cool drawings, but we had vanishing points all over the classroom this afternoon.
Add those shapes of bushes back here. And we might be able to go back and add some color. Some more color, a little bit more of the local color. We'll see. It's just having the 2 tones is actually working pretty well.
You still think you're going to bring that sap green in at the end?
I don't know. I'm kind of reconsidering that now.
I mean, you have warm colors, already somewhat in the trees, and I guess you could throw some yellow ochre in there if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was going to put a little bit more color on the building.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Getting a cramp in my leg.
Got to do more stretches before painting.
Oh my gosh.
Eat
that
banana,
was
build up your potassium, start painting.
Oh my gosh, that was my hamstring, just right hamstring, just completely tightened up. I don't know if you guys get cramps or not. It is awful. Not funny. No, it is painful. Extremely painful.
Yeah, cramps hurt. They do. I eat bananas every day.
I do too.
Try to avoid cramping.
I still get cramps. All right, so this little sidewalk will kind of give us a little bit of a rest space there. All right, let's go back in and add a little bit of color here and there in the time that we have. Add a little bit more of a pop of the burnt sienna in a couple areas for sure. Right up here on the top edge, get a little stronger with that. Then I'm going to just kind of look for an opportunity to make the color a little stronger. Then we can make it a little stronger on this little rooftop.
Looks like a number of folks out there share your predisposition to cramp. Charles says he gets them all the time in his calves, hamstrings, quads, and feet. And I'm telling you what, calf cramps and foot cramps are painful. And Keith says worst is cramps when you're lying in bed. And worst is when it's what wakes you up from lying in bed. That is jarring. It's like waking up to a nightmare.
Okay, I'm going back with a little bit of ultramarine in the shadowed areas just to make that contrast a little stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And let's add just a touch of yellow ochre with just a little bit of cadmium yellow to the front edge of this.
Oh, cadmium yellow.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Very warm.
And then give
nice.
it a little dab. Let's add a little bit more of the burnt sienna to the palm trees. A little bit of that in there. And we can make some of our openings and shadows a little bit darker. And you know what? I think this one's going to be finished on time. I don't believe it. We want to have just a little hint of sky too. So something else to add.
Well, you know, at the very beginning of the process, you were working frantically. You really covered the composition pretty quick in your first pass. So
let's add a little bit of yellow ochre.
I'm not surprised you're making it in.
That yellow ochre cadmium yellow mixture to the trees.
All right. There we go. Get a little optical mixture in there. It's leaning green or goes over the ultramarine.
It's reading it's green, isn't it? Even though there's not green in there.
Right.
All right, we'll do the same to some of these bushes down here.
Just shows you what you can do with primary colors. Practically everything.
All right, we're going to give a quick little swipe of sky here.
And
we're going to stick with the ultramarine because it wouldn't make sense to bring in a different blue. I'm just going to go right along the edge here.
Keith wonders if using sap green in the trees alone would make them too strong of a focus because it would be a local color. But sap green's not, it's pretty earthy, so I don't know. Could be a danger.
Let those edges be a little rough, a little brush strokey.
A little dry brush action in there. That adds a little more variety.
I think that's going to do it, guys. Let this dry a little bit, but
all right.
I think I'm pretty happy with this. I didn't end up using the other pen, which is a 0.3, which is just a thicker line, because I think what we've got with the smaller lines is just fine. I could go in here and put a little bit of shadow in areas, but I really kind of like the watercolor dominating the ink drawing. So, you know, with a line and wash image, one medium is going to dominate over the other. It's just going to happen. You want to try to find some kind of balance between the pen and ink and watercolor applications. So if you have, if you are more dominant with your pen and ink applications, you know, you're going to use less watercolor. If you're more dominant with your watercolor applications, you're going to use less pen and ink. So you have to kind of find this balance whenever you create a line and wash image. And in this case, I feel like the watercolor is a little bit more dominant. This almost, if I kept working on it, I almost could create just a watercolor painting without any pen and ink.
Yeah, you've pretty much done all of your modeling with the watercolor. You've got more of some contours and character marks in there with the pen.
Yeah, so
definitely dominates.
So that means I need to pull back a little bit with the watercolor or the pen and ink applications, so that there is a balance between the two. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to put a little bit more color. I just want a little bit more color in the road down here. I know it's kind of grayish.
We get a lot of great comments rolling in. Ferns English says, "I love this." Marina Free says, "Best work of the season."
Oh, wow.
And Susan reiterates, "Love this." So I think our folks out there appreciate this process and having gotten a chance to see it on our timed lessons, Getting Sketchy.
Yeah, people love line wash.
Mm-hmm.
They love that. And I like it too. But, I will tell you, just so you know, watercolor, in my opinion, and other people share this opinion, is the most difficult painting medium to work with. So the reason why I say that is because a lot of people are going to want to jump into urban sketching and this kind of stuff, and that's great. It is, jump into it. But keep in mind that watercolor is not the easiest medium to start with. So I don't want you to get discouraged if you start with this style of art, which is so popular right now, and you have trouble with the watercolor applications. Just work through it, practice with it, learn what the watercolor is capable of and what it's not capable of, and let it be a little bit free on the surface. Let it move around, and let it be watercolor. So that shouldn't deter you from doing this style of art. I'm just telling you because this is kind of the word craze is not the right word, but it kind of is because this style is so popular right now, and I know a lot of new people or people new to art are getting into it, and I don't want people to get frustrated
and believe that art is hard.
Right.
It's just sometimes it's a medium that's good to work up to after you get a really strong sense of a value in drawing.
Yes, because watercolor relies a lot on the white of the paper, and we know that values are so incredibly important. So if you get too dark too quick, or you get your colors muddied together, then it can be really disappointing and really frustrating. And I don't want that to be you. So allow mistakes to happen, be loose and free, and allow yourself some freedom, especially when using watercolor. All right. Do we have anything else?
PJ Hall says, thank you. And Lord Engine says, came out really well. Let's see. And Jan says, I started with watercolor. Humbling.
Yes. And you know what? I never changed camera angles, but here's a look at the artwork. I got so much going on here.
PJ has supported our show with a shout out. He says, thank you.
Oh,
we thank you right
awesome.
back, PJ.
Well, I'll have to switch back over here so I can do the cheer.
Yeah!
Thank you there, PJ. That cheer's too long. That's too long. Thank you so much, PJ. Thank you for being a part of the channel. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, even though I didn't change camera angles. I am sorry for that. I need a producer. What I need.
Yeah.
All right. So if that's it, let's go ahead and switch back over, and we'll do that now. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Oh gosh! Look.
What? Put them back in the
I
box.
need a producer. I pushed the wrong button. I was switched over and I was like, I have made it through the whole show and I have pushed all the right buttons, even though I didn't change camera angles.
Yep. And not pushing a button doesn't count as pushing the wrong button. So you were okay there until just the last minute.
Until the last
minute of the show.
The very last minute, I pushed the wrong button. You see what kind of chaos ensued. We were cheering and the lights were off. It was terrible, but you survived. Right. Okay, guys, I hope you will join us again next week for Getting Sketchy. Again, that's going to be a review show. We'll look at all the artworks that we created. We'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's going to be a valuable show for you to watch. There won't be a reference because we're not going to be doing any drawing next week. But after the last episode in Getting Sketchy, for this season, I will take a few weeks off before we return. I'll continue to publish videos on YouTube for you guys here and there. So make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And leave a comment. I know you guys are watching this live. People who are watching this right now are watching it live. but you're going to be watching the recorded. Many of you are going to be watching the recorded version. So leave a comment below too. That not only gives us feedback, but it also helps YouTube show this video to other people. So when you comment, that somehow factors into the algorithm and all that stuff. All right, Ashley, you have anything else for everybody?
I'm just looking forward to the next episode. It's one of my favorite. And I go to bed. It's getting late. Got school tomorrow.
Okay, so Ashley is parenting Ike. Ike, I'm going to tell you also. It's time to go to bed. It's time to go to bed.
Time for bed.
All right. Don't be sad. Don't be.
Oh no.
Don't be sad.
Yeah.
I think
your
okay.
season's not over.
Yeah.
We're gonna do this all year, 4 days a week. So your season's not over. It's over for everybody else. Yeah. By the way, folks, Ike's got a really good drawing going on in my classroom right now. So where we put these ideas into practice. So maybe we'll have to show some of that off.
All right. Awesome, guys. We're going to get ready for the live lesson. And if you are not a member yet, you can become a member and see me do a line and wash image in a completely, well, not completely different, but a very different style, using dip pens for this series and tight controlled watercolor applications on hot press watercolor. So a hot press watercolor paper. So a lot different. All right, guys. With that, we're going to go ahead and sign out for this evening. We'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.